Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Uncanny X-Men Issue 4, cover dated March of 1964. This issue marks the first appearance of several prominent mutant characters, including Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Toad, and Mastermind. The issue was written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Reinman, and lettered by Art Simek. Our story begins with a striking splash page, showing the Beast as he's in the middle of a particularly challenging Danger Room course. While the young hero has done well so far, Professor X still urges him to improve and be wary of sudden traps. But Cyclops then speaks up as he questions how much more of the test his teammate can take. Yet the Beast himself seems determined to finish it, although he knows the worst is yet to come. Thus we next see him dodge a strike from a mace, weave around large falling discs, and then swing a rope across a pit of water. Except that last one doesn't go so smoothly, as the rope is actually made of paper and thus crumbles in the Beast's hands. Recovering from his subsequent fall into the pit, Professor X takes the opportunity to teach the Beast this lesson. No matter what danger might face him, he must always think twice before trusting a sudden means of escape. But with that, it's now Iceman's turn to run the gauntlet. So the professor orders him to head to the opposite end of the danger room and prepare to begin. Iceman obliges and creates an ice slide that he rides to the other end, while confidently remarking how easy the course will be. Yet his slide is then suddenly destroyed by a metal trap springing up from behind, signaling that his trial has begun, and giving the professor an opportunity to remind him that his ice is not as indestructible as he thinks. Yet he would never claim it wasn't useful, as Iceman then creates a pole vault that saves him from falling into a red-hot cauldron. But he barely has any time to recover his balance back on the ground, as Beast suddenly hurls at him a 75-pound weight. Iceman sees the attack coming and creates another ice slide which catches the weight and sends it back towards the Beast, who of course dodges it. But Iceman thus thinks that his test is over and declares that nothing can catch him off guard. Yet at that exact moment a sudden blast of steam does just that and melts away the coat of protective ice that covers his body. Iceman then realizes he's failed his test, as Professor X reminds him to never consider a mission complete until every possible avenue of danger has been checked. While Iceman then lays defeated on the ground, the Angel suddenly swoops in and hoists him into the air. Over the last few issues, the two have developed an antagonistic relationship, and thus the Angel releases Iceman mid-air, sending him falling towards the ground in an immature prank. But luckily Marvel Girl's there to catch him using her telekinesis. But speaking of the young hero, it's now her turn to trial her powers. Yet her test is not another course through the danger room, but a simple box which she must mentally open. While a rather straightforward task, Professor X does commend her as she opens it with the same precision as one's hands. Inside is actually just a birthday cake, as the professor announces that it's been 1 year since their class began. And so the team and their teacher celebrate, as Cyclops happily cuts the cake using his optic beams. But the issue then shifts focus to another group eating around a table, one far more wicked. They are the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, a rather dysfunctional team of villains assembled by a mysterious leader. On the far left of their table is an ugly hunchback named Toad, who's chomping away at what's either potatoes or brown goo. The young mutant to his right is Quicksilver, who rebukes him for eating so obnoxiously. But then the girl next to him chimes in, as she's the Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver's sister. She tells her brother to let the issue go, as apparently he's quick to temper and has already gotten into a number of fights with his teammates. Yet it's then that the last of the four uses his mutant powers of illusion to cast the image of a pig over Toad's face, as he thinks the hunchback's manners ought to match his appearance. He is known as Mastermind, a chauvinist whom the Scarlet Witch has come to despise. She tells him as much, remarking that his illusions are just as repulsive as Toad's table manners. Mastermind brushes off the comment and replies with a rather creepy romantic advance. The Scarlet Witch is revolted by it and claims that she'd rather die than marry him. But Mastermind doesn't take that comment very well, as he rises from his seat and threatens to cast an illusion so realistic in her mind that she'll go insane. But he doesn't have the chance, as the protective Quicksilver rushes to his sister's aid and lands a powerful punch to Mastermind's face. The mutant illusionist then quickly recovers and vows to destroy Quicksilver. But the trio's squabbling is then interrupted by the cheerful goading of Toad, who hopes that they'll destroy each other, leaving only him and their leader left to rule the world. The comment jogs Mastermind's memory, reminding him of their leader's wishes. So he calls off his fight with Quicksilver, as he doesn't want to spoil their leader's plan for him. But the issue then shifts focus to the leader himself, otherwise known as Magneto. He's barged into the office of a large shipping lane and announced his plans to steal an old naval freighter. The workers there are helpless to stop him, as he simply traps them in a band of magnetic force and waltzes right onto the freighter. Despite its age and intricacies, activating the ship is a simple task for Magneto, as he can control its every knob, dial, and button using only his mind. So he starts up its engine and begins heading off towards an unknown location. But as he's traveling, he's spotted by the Angel, who's on a routine test flight. Yet the hero doesn't know Magneto's inside the freighter and assumes it's just a target ship being remote controlled. Thus he quickly leaves the area, as he doesn't want to interfere with any naval training. The issue then shifts forward into the X-Mansion, as the Angel is arriving back from his test flight. He gives Professor X a report on what he'd seen and mentions the freighter, but still thinks nothing of it. Yet the professor is more suspicious, as he knows that no artillery tests were scheduled at that time. As he takes a moment to think about it, he begins sensing danger. But the issue then suddenly shifts back to Magneto, who's arrived at his destination. It's an uncharted island in the Atlantic Ocean, which he and his Brotherhood have settled. Greeting him is a giddy Toad, who eagerly tells him of the near fight that occurred in his absence. Magneto asks Mastermind if he's telling the truth. To which the dodgy mutant tries to downplay the event. But Toad then calls him out for lying, causing Mastermind to lose his temper and threaten his teammate in front of Magneto. The villain himself then snaps at Mastermind, as he furiously rebukes him for putting their mission in jeopardy for the sake of petty revenge. He then casts him aside and demands to speak with Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. But the former declares that he and his sister aren't scared of him and announce their plans to leave. Yet Magneto responds surprisingly calmly as he approaches Scarlet Witch and reminds her of the debt that she and her brother owe to him. Thinking back to the day that he saved them, she realizes he's right and reluctantly agrees to stay until her debt is repaid. Thus Quicksilver also acquiesces, as he feels obligated to watch over his sister and keep her safe. It's then that Magneto takes the two back to that fateful day in a Central European village, when an angry mob mistook Scarlet Witch's mutant powers for those of an actual spellcaster. If not for his sudden arrival, she surely would have perished at their hands. Magneto then takes the opportunity to espouse his ideology, where mutants are the natural superiors of normal humans, and thus their rightful rulers. Quicksilver remarks that he's not completely sold on the idea, but will go along with his plans as long as his sister stays. The issue then pans out to reveal that Magneto's island hideout is actually a massive fortress, from where the villain and his Brotherhood will launch their assault on humanity. But the issue then suddenly shifts forward several days later into the X-Mansion, where Professor X is reading the latest newspaper. Its headline reveals that a lone freighter has been attacking the small South American nation of Santo. To the world, the freighter's origin and motives are a mystery, but the professor quickly realizes it's the work of Magneto. Thus he sounds an alarm that echoes throughout the mansion and signals his X-Men to ready for battle. They all rush to get changed and quickly arrive to receive their orders from the professor. Yet they find him slumped in his chair and trapped in a trance-like state. Cyclops realizes that he's traveled to a mental plane, which the professor subconsciously confirms as he mindlessly mutters to Magneto. Thus the issue shifts to that plane, where the two mutants stand as spirits, caught in an epic battle. Yet the pair's conflict is one of ideology, as Magneto tries to convince his foe of his vision for mutant supremacy. But of course the professor rejects this view and claims that it's the duty of mutants to aid humanity towards a shared future. Yet it's obvious that neither will relent in their stances, so Magneto breaks mental contact and leaves the professor to wake from his trance. Now awoken and with his X-Men gathered before him, he declares that his most dreaded days come, as Magneto is preparing an all-out offensive against humanity. The issue then shifts focus to the villain himself, as he and his Brotherhood have finished attacking Santo from their ship and are now ready to invade. Thus we next see them within its capital, escorted by a massive army. Its terrifying sight sends the people of Santo fleeing, yet none of them suspect that the soldiers are actually one of Mastermind's illusions. Magneto commends the mutant for his work, but Scarlet Witch speaks up and questions why his plan is built on fear, to which the villain responds that humans are like sheep and fear is their shepherd. But the issue then jumps forward a short time later, where Magneto has taken over the country and somehow convinced its army to work for him. A few of these soldiers are patrolling the nation's borders as a cramped car approaches. Inside are the professor and his students, who are permitted access under their civilian identities. The issue then shifts focus to Magneto's throne, upon which he delivers harsh punishments to any who oppose his rule. But it's then that he realizes the X-Men have arrived, as he can sense Professor X's incredibly powerful mental emanations. Thus he orders his Brotherhood to get ready for battle, just as Professor X is doing the same. Yet the professor first retrieves a piece of paper and cleverly maps out his team's battle plan, as each member will attack Magneto from a different avenue of approach. First is the Beast, who climbs up a watchtower of the villain's castle headquarters and subdues 2 of its guards. But he's then suddenly struck by the Toad, whose agility is a match for his own. The blow knocks him off of the watchtower, but he's able to cling onto its wall before he crashes into the ground. The Beast then begins climbing back up to confront Toad, who in turn drops several boulders from above. Yet the rocks miss, as Mastermind steps in and casts an illusion that seemingly turns the watchtower into smooth glass. Without any apparent grip, the Beast begins helplessly falling. Yet the issue then shifts to the other side of the castle, where the Angel is easily zipping through soldiers' machine gun fire. To subdue them, he cleverly flies up to a nearby tower and tosses down a high-tension cable. Its wires get tangled up within the soldiers' guns and thus electrocutes them. For the few that remain, he simply swoops in and knocks them out with an old-fashioned punch. But just like his teammate before him, he's also ambushed by an evil mutant. This time it's Quicksilver, who strikes the Angel with a lightning-fast punch. But the hero knows when he's out of his element and thus takes to the air. Quicksilver chases after him, but is so focused on capturing his foe that he fails to notice an incoming wall, one that he runs right into. The collision knocks Quicksilver out, giving the Angel a moment to rest. Yet it's truly only a moment, as the Scarlet Witch then arrives and discovers that her brother's been defeated. Thus she furiously attacks the Angel, yet doesn't lay a single finger on him. Instead she uses her ill-defined hex power, which causes a large structure to collapse on top of him. This knocks the hero out, giving a pair of soldiers enough time to tie him up and for Quicksilver to regain consciousness. But the issue then shifts focus to Magneto, as the Angel's being delivered to him. Yet it's then that Cyclops suddenly arrives and nearly blasts the villain. While he misses this first attack, he lands the second and sends 2 soldiers rolling away. Quicksilver then rushes to grab a hold of him before he can blast Magneto. Yet the motion alters the hero's aim, causing his beam to strike an electric generator on the floor above. The damaged machine then starts going haywire and begins spewing a torrent of electricity throughout the castle. Magneto and his allies flee from its peril, leaving Cyclops to free an awakened Angel. Yet the electricity cascading around him is too dangerous to be ignored, so he summons a powerful beam that sends the generator crashing through a wall. He's successful in deactivating it, but the effort required knocks him out, leaving both him and the Angel now helpless. Meanwhile, Iceman is outside to catch the generator and then use a frozen ladder to climb up the tower his teammates are trapped in. Reaching them within a few minutes, he uses his ice powers to untie Angel and shock Cyclops back to consciousness. The trio then race to reunite with their teammates and defeat Magneto. Yet as they're traveling through a passageway, a set of decorative weapons suddenly begin levitating off a nearby wall and start barreling towards them. The 3 are able to dodge the weapons, which had actually been sent by Marvel Girl, as she had mistaken her teammates for Magneto soldiers. Also with her is the Beast, who she had evidently saved from his fall. Thus the team's been reunited, but it's hardly a time to celebrate, as through all of their fighting they really haven't accomplished much. So they take a moment to regroup and come up with a plan. But they don't have long, as a river of boiling oil suddenly starts rushing towards them. The X-Men race to escape it, but find themselves cornered by a stone wall. Cyclops's beams are too exhausted to blast through it, and without his power, it seems that the X-Men have met their end. Yet the flames' advance is abruptly halted as Professor X inexplicably emerges from within. His amazed students marvel at their teacher's apparent invincibility, yet the professor explains that the oil was simply another of Mastermind's illusions meant to keep them trapped. But the issue then shifts focus to the villain himself, who's witnessed the defeat of his illusion through a peephole. With him are the rest of the Brotherhood as well as Magneto, who's setting up 2 hidden bombs. One is simply meant to kill the X-Men, while the other is a nuclear weapon meant to destroy the entire nation of Santo. Quicksilver learns of this and questions why so many innocents must die. Yet Magneto claims that the act is one of self-defense, as the people of Santo would just as quickly kill them. The issue then shifts back to the X-Men as they're approaching the door to the room that the villains are in. Yet Professor X senses its danger and yells for the Beast to stop his eager advance. But the young hero doesn't hear him, so the professor hurls himself in front of the door, just as Magneto's first bomb detonates. Thus he takes the brunt of the explosion and is sent flying away. He lands in the arms of Marvel Girl, dazed but conscious. While the rest of the team tend to the professor, a vengeful Cyclops attempts to strike at the villains who are fleeing through an escape chute that leads to their freighter. Yet before he leaves, Magneto activates the second bomb with a timed detonation of 10 minutes. Cyclops is not fast enough to stop him, but Quicksilver surprisingly is, and destroys the bomb's fuse but still escapes along with the rest of his teammates. Cyclops then attempts to pursue him and the rest of the Brotherhood, but is halted by Iceman, who tells him that their most pressing concern is not the villains, but the professor. He realizes that Iceman's right, and thus rushes to aid his teacher, who we learn has suffered a severe head injury that has rendered him powerless. The issue subsequently ends as the professor urges his students to forget him and pursue the villains, thus leaving them with a decision to make. Leave him to die and defeat their foes, or save him but let them escape. That concludes Uncanny X-Men 4 and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was perhaps the series' first great story. Somehow it managed to introduce 4 new characters, each with their own unique personalities, while still developing our established heroes. Magneto was a particular standout, as he was still given time to be the ruthless villain, but also a misguided ideologue and an unexpected savior. I also appreciated the time given to Professor X's development. One of my concerns with his characterization in the first 2 issues was how stoic and overbearing he was. But this issue and the last have largely eroded that feeling, as we've seen him develop into more of a father figure towards his students. I'd also like to note the great additions of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Some of my favorite villains are those with conflictions about their actions or loyalties, which perfectly describes what the siblings are going through, and I'm thus excited to see how their doubts develop over the coming issues. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.